Hello, Americans. I want you to understand how I'm speaking to you as the identity of volume science that is hypernative pure, that is unabridged, is why we're supposed to get the Constitution unabridged and have Marbury versus Madison appreciated in ways that a breaching method knew that modern semi-ancient countries' names and defenses of their names syntactically. It knew that they would simultaneously be self-valuing. How a breaching method, a human fact treatment nature breaching method, in semi-ancient times before modern religion's messengers were even born, the scientists were forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to defend themselves and their names further as people, tactical ulterior, from what could then afford simultaneously to have what actually to have the quality of fact treatment nature capable of countering properly things like criminal foreign influences. See, this breaching method knew that the fact treatment natures would counter things like criminal foreign influences and like criminal enterprises as collusions through a method that locks names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, victims and victims advocates, and the background sources of the interbranch, and their names and their families, the difference between that and their sources, and the news at the same time, collusions with much worse. And it is recorded, forgiveness is for this. That we have to use the phrases like intelligence community as regular citizens because for example, this is also uses of confessions, where how a breaching method measures and maintains its uses of difference slash S, tactical ulterior, from how nature and reason that is honest and simultaneously sane communicates for us to communicate about everything. There is that identity of hyper simultaneous and or that distinct identity of simultaneous that is a scientific value needed by reason, where and how it is the identity that reveals humanity with two eyes, for example, and other species bodies with two eyes. All exceptions in exception nature are in demonstration of the same thing, slash S. There is a hyper simultaneous, an identity of hyper simultaneous per science, per scientific needs, where accumulation is by identity of value progression. It is now through systems tactical ulterior from the one that is hyper native pure. And this is relative to where and to how. Native Americans who had been fighting with each other because of the breaching method. This is what our founders communicated to before our founders were born. This breaching method had already taken possession of semi-ancient names and modern countries and their colonial foundations names. They don't even England doesn't even remember the history of English, let alone the Irish. They don't, because in other words, individual, grouped and together. The ancients, before the sciences became criminally foreign influence, they appreciated as reason does, what is properly described. They appreciated the only increasing value. How it comes simultaneously, equally value, only increasing. Not just the extent of its identity that we could discern. Where and how the verb has five names. We could discern its five distinct identities of sequence slash simultaneous nature grouped. And that is also simultaneously three ways. and where and how it shows us its identity of volume. Also a forever nature, as English was revealed to teach. Its identity of volume is identity of relationship to itself, as nature teaches. And the only increasing value of that, they were our bound identities of relativity to the identity of hyperrelativity. That is, again, the identity of order, singular. For example, also to 5 identities of order. The value of truth before the smallest finite detail now, even if everyone agrees the truth is other than it actually was. And then the order of finite now, the smallest finite detail. And note how we can only grapple with the finite completely properly one way. And in other words, slash s. And the active. So what is active is reliant upon what came first, not just with language. And it has a conjunctive, it has conjunction to the active, where its identity of relativity distinctly, while non-distinctly, to the 5 identities of order, which active is the third. It is where and how they simultaneously transfer. It's a simultaneously value transfer, where they're gaining each other's volume, which is only increasing per what is actually demonstrated by nature. Now, part of the means to discern this requires observation of and uses constantly of why and how we have black pupils and whites of eyes. And since we're the youngest age, we have means with this to discern how the identities of law and the overt criminal enterprises, plural, and private ones, and the insidiousness of logic A through Z, a certain type of victim slash hyper victim that is recorded by nature various ways, hyper evidentially recorded, in other words, used to sense through our own, everywhere the human species body is. Even if that body is a majority of people, even of countries, even of the whole species body's volume. How many things we agree about and would have agreed about had not this game with everyone involved. This before people took oaths, they had roles with predicate acts with facts that were simultaneously overtly slash insidiously shown to them that they know that's plausible. So we cannot, it's relative to predicate acts with facts roles that are way worse than crimes that some of these people also made up against people increasingly. That people speaking and the only ones, being trained to do against crimes. That's one of the things, like, for example, all these countries have criminal justice. They agreed to speak about the law. There are formal definitions of things like terrorism, of things like war crimes, where and how this breaching method makes victims to use them, and the difference not allowed. In other words, and real criminals, real evil people, collusions with what's keeping that, because it's also using those. They're attaching them to fake. They're lying about their motivations when they've been using torture methods, and then they have to hide that, and they have to blame on other things other than themselves, where they are quality of fact cheaping nature as hyper criminal insidiousness. I'm not even a lawyer. Nature shows us the needs to slash criminal insidiousness natures. So in other words, when we have with those laws that were in place with colonization were about and are about where and how they are referenced by the experts on each of the experts on each of the sciences, and then further as jobs. They are influenced by from off all campuses locations. But the republic for this ancient republic for which we stand. The reason we have the flag for which we stand, for example, with syntax, this can't be understood properly. The flag in place of the republic. It is the republic for which we stand. And that is a hyper invisible, but still discernible identity of volume. Its identity extent of an identity of volume /s. Its identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that. Again, native pure, hyper native pure. See, we have been systems tactically ulterior from its own, and where and how it teaches us the difference of how and why. It wants us to be able to discern the difference between temporary positive as criminal insidiousness nature or as temporary positive per its system, which is an identity of relativity to what is positive into negative simultaneously, just as not everyone's identity is. But where and how there's that other nature of positive that will only stay positive onto itself. Again, with the relativity only increasing of the scientific value, the scientific fact that a breaching method used remotely, also countries grouped, also used remotely the difference between their roles or the people that were involved with it at the locations where they have slavery involved. And for example, as a subject treatment, see exceptions in exception nature are being left out. And there are proofs, it is more probable and more practical, a whole bunch of ways, that it is not by accident that Boolean logic, Boolean, and that bully sounds similar. Because the word /value bullying is being and has been used for predicate acts with facts roles and for identity and sequence shifts, faked motivations planting, and with real motivations used to disguise the breaching method. For example, which is one of the answers relative to questions that have been ignored tactically. Like what caused slavery? What caused slavery is and was a predicate acts with facts delivery system method, and or the difference of that and how it was simultaneously a criminal insidiousness nature delivery system method / because also the difference between where and how it measured and maintained only formally allowed collusions as psychopaths, the intelligence community, which means the three branches of government, and exceptions in exception nature, not really as them, but as them. For example, the military. For example, on off their state offices, on off the state corrections offices, on off the state judicial branch offices. They have roles with this method that is and was conscious uses, self-value of everyone with tactically juxtaposed, totally distinct natures of organized crime. therefore of organized crime bodies, to the difference of between how people know each other and don't. This is a method that attaches everyone and everyone around them and the differences of who's around them and what a capacity used effectively by a breaching method that effectively employs names, needs, and natures to sense if anyone's going to use short words properly. And so to forbid the protraction. And so to forbid possession slash hyper-possession slash S of the short words of people at all formal locations, how kept, motivated to have roles with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and all kinds of natures of things and people they don't want to have self-valued roles with. But see, this breaching method, nature shows how it made exceptions for everyone, where and how it exploits everyone speaking through others, where how it exploits the difference, already had themselves exploit the difference between overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and the insidiousness of the logic of people A through Z. For example, where relative are summaries about history by the experts on history, are summaries of each of the sciences by the experts of those sciences, and regarding the value and relativity of that, and where and how this employed all employments before our founders were born to screen its own roles with their motivations, with their criminal insidiousness, positive treatments, negative treatments, or exceptions treatments, where and how it used and uses all lists and arrays associated with logic, identities of logic, identities of reason associated with the subjects and or the topics in the news. They're leaving out exceptions in exception H. They are leaving out this hyperscope. Black pupils. Yeah. It is the time that our countries have had weapons. Where there is an excuse, for example, each country is sickly distinctly a victim of what they have peace relative to war. They're leaving out exceptions and exception nature. Those are criminal insidiousness natures of peace and collusion here and there. They have our founders blamed for slavery. And they're pretending because it's just because it's published and agreed about by others. This is relative to uses of the phrase groupthink by people legitimately wanting to counter that, simultaneously in the furtherance of it and self-valuing people having been in the furtherance of it. People are only defending their, in other words, they have caseloads and things like that, types of jobs. Nature showed us to understand where and how the branch of the government can't help but be temporary positive, only increasingly valuable. But it's because it's while it's demonstrating the difference between criminal insidiousness nature of positive law, which is Earth's a special difference, and there in our special difference. And if this is the way, either everything's when it's gaining itself, it's also that value transfer, but it's through systems tactically ulterior than these. So we have people speaking about success. And look at New York City. Imagine a little girl on the top of those big tenements and the ones next to them, though. And or the exceptions, through as cities are manifest with those exceptions too. Where and how there's a fact-cheating nature, racketeering worse than war crimes method. And we can discern that with the hyper-evidential. We could simultaneously discern self-value as that hyper actually recorded criminally foreign influence uses of words like terrorism, of words like prejudice or racism or hate, or consciously what is actually recorded. They have these inter-religious spots, roles, with forcing equality of fact-sheeping nature that prevents people from using their voices properly with all communications locate platforms. The difference between if we know who's actually typing and pretending to be that person or not is also being and has been recorded involved used criminally foreign influence, because those same names involved with the Weathersfield Police Department, time with a whole bunch of other police departments and their family members, with wire crime acts and methods with state police families, interstates, and with military police forms involved with wire crime acts and methods and other natures of organized crime and uses of that as roles consciously with that method overtly slash insidiously, sickly, distinctly, multi-front, but in a connected way against each age of correlation nature. It measures and maintains identities of logic self-value with criminally foreign influence uses of databases, relationships, and methods to exploit timing where people are going to be. Increasingly, where and how before people took oaths, they were involved with predicate acts with facts, where and how the relativity of the overt slash insidious predicate acts with facts roles, like with color. They have the differences interbranch as ones that are KKK themed, Confederate flag themed, and black themed, and as the whereas not interbranch, but as their intelligence and people associated directly and indirectly and as their sources. So they have courts with crime methods recorded where they pretend to be people. People are saying bad things against witnesses because being forced, also lawyers too, motivations planting because there are foreign bodies involved. The locations, areas, and states have self-value, where and how originally and still they never stop being formal collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, insidiousness of A through Z only allowed to be manifest, or that body would be sensed through our own, including as a majority. The majority of people who, in other words, if we try to take a stand against how and why they put white Caucasian, and we have and those options on forms, these are also people that just fabricate. The FBI has rules with handwriting experts at Rocky Hill locations and on off Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University with names involved with wire crimes with police, switching names, forging names. One of them says his name is Darth Vader. He's involved with people, even if it was made up an untimely death on Trinity College's campus. It's involved with names that were involved with that, even if it was made up, with predicate acts on my street in Weathersfield. And they had been involved with names at other places I lived, including with leasing agents tied to the same intelligence community near me. And they're lying about why I use their names because there are foreign bodies involved. They're forcing everyone either to use people's names or not. And with the exceptions, as collusions where and how involved are names on all sides of criminal and of civil cases, and their lawyers, and victims advocates and their sources in the interbranch switching and forging names, and using that to lock in intelligence roles with criminally foreign influence uses of databases. And then further, while pretending other collusions with other natures of industries. Central Connecticut State University has a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and has his co-defendants who are various natures of federal criminals and involved with other ones who have roles planting evidences on and off each of the campuses I went to from a smallest kid. They have roles with uses of corners of streets and buildings and exceptions consciously. I don't know the Dominic Machete. There was one exception. I sat real short next to his sister. It was recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They have roles with the intelligence community that's collusion with military. I found out, but I knew it was with judges and prosecutors I'm finding out more and more. I mean, I'm just going to say it the way it is now. In other words, I never had conversation with them. Whatever there was, they faked. They changed because they have other names involved with this. Intercities through time. People with West Hartford. Joe DeMoro and Ray Cololo said that there's people with the name. Um, Now they're involved with the FBI director in his defendant capacities, also with various courts, judges, and prosecutors, where and how they've been involved with individually grouped and together predicate acts methods, each branch of government, and then the same way further grouped as branches of government, and where and how the differences between that and also use criminally foreign influence, the prisons tied to them because and the campuses, inter-campuses and intra-campuses, and all communications platforms. They kept and keep. They have a whole bunch of people. They have roles with mayors and their family members, and their roles next to parks and next to their houses, with predicate acts at other locations and with other natures of politicians. There are a whole bunch of ones involved with people tied to a Mr. Abruzzi, who used to teach at a principal child abusers campus, when another principal had a daughter at the same school, had a daughter involved with a, a Kevin um, Harris, and he's involved with identity theft, fraud, slander. There are proofs that the only time I ever saw him on a campus, they walked out of the door. They took a picture of that to pretend I would be lying in the future if I said I don't know him. They have roles with judges and prosecutors and foreign and domestic military and nations involved with the war with the World Trade Center attack, and a Luigi forced hurt persuaded with the FBI and people involved with his sister, which is also one of the ones involved on Elm Street, and with the family members of prosecutors and I mean of retired and standing judges, and individually grouped and together too, where and how this is all has been used remotely, all location /s, increasingly names next to along Church Street and Main Street and Old Weathersfield, which is the last of the 13, and slash Hartford, which is the last of the 13 points of counterposition our founders had to make within more than 13 colonies. Not just to fight against England, to fight against the entrenched roles within an entrenched fact sheet nature, torture, extortion, and slavery method. It also forced us to begin as self-valued roles with this. And the breaching method during this time measured and maintained what our founders communicated to us. Not capable of being told, not communicated of being. So Marbury versus Madison meant more then and means more finite then. What the stewards of it could afford to have discerned. This is also relative to where and to how the motivations of courts' names regarding the value of witch trials then and now. This comes with the hyper-evidential, but when we use the hyper-evidential, it shows how a breaching method employs names on all sides of criminal and of civil cases to roles with criminally foreign influence uses of databases, including by the interbranch, and the difference of that and when did the prisons stop being involved with? They're recorded involved planting evidences with the people, the families that run them, and the campuses. There was a sub-Vigerio, I don't know, who sought me out to make confessions and demonstrations, where also what is said is different than what is communicated. And everyone's also attached to fake locations, fake ties, fake natures of ties to other people, and they're planting fake motivations with foreign bodies. So these are people involved also with a whole bunch of with judges, a whole bunch of people tied to inter-campuses, planting evidences that were never even in classes together. And they jump into people's conversations where the social media of interbranch locations is also involved with World Trade Center attack crimes. The digital police forms are being influenced by former director of the FBI's involvements with World Trade Center attack locations and the Ninth Circuit Court right next to it with predicate acts, with facts, and preventing people from reporting things because they're using and have used the Fox News judges' Facebook pages and Fox News' Facebook pages as collusions with child offenders, including digital, sexual, medical at the same time, and interbranch women involved with it, women judges involved with a whole bunch of police forms, plural, on and off Central Connecticut State University, also foreign ones. They are not legitimate with criminal justice and with anyone's name. This also that they are needing to hide what actually came first. So they affected confessions to me about Central Connecticut State University's roles with the intelligence community. Like intercities from Central Connecticut State University, they've been involved a whole bunch of ways with Wethersfield campuses and with intercities campuses. I found out it's Rocky Hill campuses, Hartford campuses, and there is a method /S they use where and how they have rules criminally foreign influence. And this is victims / hyper victims per way worse. This is relative to where and to how we're supposed. They need to lie about how and why we use other people's names or don't. All investigations, investigators, and identities of practical reason descriptions were criminally foreign influence. Use Emmanuel Kant's phrase, practical reason. I mean, it's a phrase. It's a subject. To pay attention to the subject /S of Immanuel Kant. We must pay attention. We must not leave out the value of how all the ways it was recorded. He didn't have free speech. If you want to make appreciation of the phrase sense and sensibilities, you can't leave out the predicate acts with facts method /S and or the difference between that and or the criminal insidiousness nature of facts uses, whether we're used by other or that self. Truth is used for lies. This is discernible. So they have people trying to speak that don't know how to speak for a reason, because the experts on reason have criminally foreign influence uses of databases. 3 times, but the first time I was forced for mental evaluation. The other 2 times they made up things to pull me in there because I caught them the first time. I forced people to call the police without telling them why. I told them I'm going to be a beep, 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 call the police. And they, no, I'm going to enforce it. Because I knew they had to lie, because I caught them since I was a kid. How many ways overtly / insidiously, consciously, the identities of law that are pretending to be able to speak for positive were and are shown. Look at New York City. Tell me a little girl, the suburbs were tactically denatured for the torture and extortion of George Washington and of James Madison, sickly distinctly, to measure and maintain how sickly not, because they knew a leader would emerge. Why do you think the Native Americans had been fighting with Native Americans? Not for the reasons the experts on it pretend. The experts on the sciences leave out exception nature. They have blind faith in identities like leaders of agencies that is dishonest and tactically delusions wrought. The whole sense and sensibilities changed the people involved with the Hartford courts and New Britain court, and people on off the state judicial branch offices were increasingly involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and other agencies and their family members and intimate ties. It rolls also with the difference between the intelligence community That's something to do with their roles on off fire campuses with foreign and domestic, where and how they are criminally foreign influence and self value. So that's relative to where and how the intelligence community is consciously used to stack predicate acts with facts rules, blind uses of identities, where and how that was assigned by the breaching method to measure and maintain. Self-valued roles with criminal uses of predicate acts with facts and/or the criminal insidiousness natures of positive and/or tactical delusions increasingly only capable of being manifest and self-valued by people at identities of job because of logic with blind faith in identities of law, where they never had integrity, and where they have it simultaneously, and with each one. We're supposed to use this is how reason works. Reason has semi-nature conjunction to that identity, which is hyper-simultaneous. Again, that is hyper-invisible, but still discernible. It is 5 names for the verb. And while it's teaching about how it uses exceptions and exception, nature, the same way we do, but also hyper-additional ways, where and how the infinitive could also be described. And there could be an argument made for that. An infinitive is a 5th name for a verb, but it's really in demonstration of the same thing /s. Why the verb has 5 names and how it has 5 names, which is about the 5 distinct identities of forever nature, the 5 identities of order of that single hyperorder. Thank you. Mother!